introduce Dr. Hendro Sangkoyo. It's an honor and pleasure to welcome Dr. Hendro Sangkoyo Yoyok to our class on Southeast Asian history and politics. I think for me, he's one of the most inspiring thinkers and visionaries and writers of our time. And it is a great honor and pleasure to have him with us today, especially because it's after midnight in Indonesia. He's also one of my mentors, and I have profound respect for him. He's the founder of the School of Democratic Economics, which is based in Indonesia, but he works all over the world globally. He completed his PhD at Cornell University, and we have a common mentor, Benedict Anderson, who is really also another person that binds us together, along with the late George Adichandro. So from 1998 to 2006, around the same time that I was in Melbourne, Australia, Dr. Sangkoyo was a visiting lecturer at the Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology and University of Melbourne. And he will be speaking about the Mentawaians' colonial history. So I just want to thank him so much for writing the piece that I've sent to all of you on loss, healing, and struggle, and for creating this space for us to grieve so much loss and to have a space for talking about future struggles and how to heal and recover. But apparently it's going to be very difficult because now it's going to be even worse. But yeah, I thank you for giving us hope and for coming today. So Yoyok, I'll give the floor to you. And then later, when you're ready, we can open it up for questions and answer and discussion.
Okay, thank you so much for spending time. It's a pleasure and it's an honor for me to be able to learn from you all. And also, thank you so much, Jay, for inviting me for this session. It's kind of surprising, actually, to meet Jackie again. It's a very rapid development over the past few days, actually. And so I say yes. Of course, I didn't prepare, actually, to present something solid. As an introductions, I'd like to say that this is a work in progress. So over the past 2 years, since 2022, I finally say yes for sending invitation to learn together with the Mentawaians. I'd like to just giving a background about the current situations, and then I will move back in time towards the long colonial times. This is between 1750, basically, when the west coast of Sumatra is under the British. There is this transfer of control to the Dutch. So I'd like to share the screen, just giving a very rapid animations to so you can see the context, and then probably some photographs so you can imagine the situations of what Mentawai is like today. Can you see the screen?
Yes.
The graphics shows a simple spacetime matrix whereby the Mentawai historical social-ecological entity, Sumatra West Coast, and the whole island of Sumatra are intersected by a series of political regimes from the colonial era to the present. Albeit in proximity to West Coast Sumatra, the Mentawaians live in starkly contrasting mode of life compared to their mainland neighbors. As with other historical living enclosures in the archipelago, Mentawai Islands have been subject to torrents of outside pressures. From the British and the Dutch colonial reigns up to the current one, such pressures introduced life restructuring processes, irreparable damage to Mentawaian life space, as well as a lasting intersectional transformation of the Mentawaian self. Today is indeed an unprecedented, difficult time for the Mentawaians when economic and cultural colonization come in tandem with brutal devastations of the island's ecological mainstays. My school actually use a bridging construct that we call historical social ecological entity, a space for the owners of experience under colonialism to express the inner experience. So this is an empty construct that can only be given meaning by the owner of that experience. In this sense, actually, the Mentawaians has been deprived of this voice, not unlike Spivak or questions on the subaltern. But also, as a critic of Spivak also said, actually, the way the subaltern speaks is also extremely difficult to generalize. And this is where I'd like to learn more about the Mentawai. So if you see, this is the series of episodes of onslaughts towards the body and the territory of the Mentawaians. It's a holarchy, it's not hierarchy. It's a never-ending story. And I'd like to focus on the colonial space-time zone. It's like obscure and not even known for Indonesian school children. There is no history book on the Mentawian anti-colonial war, for example. And so this is a kind of introductions for very brief presentations today. We worked so hard over the past year actually to set up a school for young Mentawaians to start thinking of returning to the river, because now the first victims of the incursions of projects, extractive and real estates in the name of tourism and all that, the very complex waterscapes that actually the source of life throughout the four big islands in Mentawai. And this is actually in the biggest island, Siberut, about 140 kilometers from Padang on the west coast. And so we set up a school to make dugout canoe, which in Mentawian it's called abak. And we went throughout 14 intricate indigenous steps to build a dugout canoe. And because you have to ask permissions and talk to the tree, this is actually now becoming my uncle, because we are adopted now as part of a tribe. It's called Sagulu tribe. They have a very clear protocol to say no to aggressions. While many also have similar protocols, but the Sagulu is actually one of the most astounding, firm stance on it. This is actually from healing sessions. The percussions, if you can hear it during the animations, actually it's always part of this kind of healing rituals, where they will invite the souls of the dead and all that, and to join the healing and then to give blessings to the sick and all. The role, but also the place of women in the Mentawian societies is a very intricate. All waterscapes is actually built for women. When the sun rises, you can see throughout the beautiful bay and rivers flocked by women rowing their sampan, or all the way until sunset. And then after sunset, then came also women doing many different things in the waters. And now it's under very grave danger because of this project. This is what I'm going to say a bit about. For today's, actually, put the title 200 Years of Menace, Mentawian Anti-Colonial Resistance from 1750 to 1950. It's a work in progress. The Dutch colonial administrations depicted their work in the face of the Mentawian as a work of civilizations. It's like a white man's burdens story all over again. But of course, this is actually with the very economistic goal of colonial extractions from a very rich cluster of islands. The first industrial logging practice was in the Mentawai by the British in around 1750, and it stopped by all-out resistance by the Mentawaians. They have this very beautiful and scary weapons. It's an arrow. It's very powerful during the Mentawai War, if I may. It's, came up all over in the newspapers. I've been digging into magazines and newspapers, around 50 newspapers and about 20 magazines, and of course, colonial reports from many different departments in the higher governments in The Hague, but also some anthropological works, particularly from the second decades of the 20th century. Between Meyer Loeb from Harvard, that it's one of the less colonial anthropology work. It's very recommended. One aspect that I'd like to stress, tensions between the idea of humanity as something good. It's like natural virtue is always in the term humanity. And colonial experience actually tells exactly the opposite. We are overwhelmed by, for example, genomic, research that claim or assume a politically neutral positions to have all bioinformations of all human beings on Earth. The Matawayan case is part of the Maritime Southeast Asia. It also demonstrates a different kind of humanity, where actually the worst of humanity has been experienced for a very long times. It's embedded in social memory of the Mentawaians, particularly the women's. And if I were now growing up as a Mentawayan, it would be extremely difficult for me to say something about, for example, development psychology, because you see layers of subjugations of the indigenous institutions, taboo in male-female connections and all that. With the coming in of colonialisms and of course the big religions, it will be very confusing for ordinary Mentawaians, women and men, to be able to say this is the right way according to us. And this is already from time immemorial, this is us. Okay. This is how we treat each other and all this. It's no longer possible. And this is already probably 9 or 10 generations. And today it's very difficult situations, a lot of sexual violence, for example. And for my surprise, there's very little historical work on the Mentawian. That's why I decided to work on this. My original focus is about the Mentawian insurgency. There is this obscure pacifications of the Mentawian, which allude to pathology of normalcy in maintaining colonial peace and order. So recently I shared bits of my reading into the archives, just like today, on this 19th century Mentawai with the prominent Mentawian activists, together with a small group of committed community lawyers. And one of the activists couldn't hide his astonishment on hearing, I'm going to talk about 100 years of Mentawian insurgency. Like, what? And he's not alone. So the high point during that pacifications of the island of Sumatra was, of course, the Aceh War. For Indonesian school kids, the Aceh War is a staple subject, together with countless regional anti-colonial figures across the archipelago. Aceh and his heroines are household names, Cut Nyak Dien and all this. Everyone knows. The opposite is true for the Mentawaians. So reading the colonial media coverage on Mentawai throughout the 18th and 19th century, we are confronted with the astonishing namelessness of the Mentawian subjects. So whenever there's new headlines on newspaper published in Delhi, Medan, or in Batavia, or in The Hague, there's always story about who got killed. This European lieutenant got killed, and then two Marsoses, but never the Mentawian. No names for the Mentawians. And women mentions after everything is said. Oh yes, two women. And this is actually very curious. So it's kind of unspoken policy that the Batavian is not worth to have names in the history of resistance throughout the Netherlands India. And that's the truth. Except when, for example, they joining or being recruited as part of the mestizo institution, so to speak, and all that, becoming the first teachers. In 1825, the residents of Sumatra West Coast, stewards, general stewards, he gave concessions to a British, his name is John Christie, for logging in it's North Page and South Page. And it's also generated smuggling, and a lot of story about this. And this happened for 5 years until 1829, and it stopped abruptly. What happened? For the logging, it's a huge endeavor. You can imagine, cut the trees and brought the trees to the harbor, and then all the way, and then it's exported to Bourbon, for example. And this is because they were ambushed by the Mentawaian, so they completely stopped the operations. That's the story. And this is the first organized deforestation. It's like the harbinger of the Suharto years. And the incursions into their life space, the forest, is the first ground for unrest against outsiders. In the words of friends in Latin America, this is, you cannot really separate the body and the territory, of course. And so it's all there. It's enough as a pretext to say no to anything coming from outsides. And the outsiders in the Mentawian word is called Sasariu. So I would be a Sasariu because I come from outside. But now the part of the Mentawians also adopting a Sasariu gaze into the Mentawai. The second thing is about trade. The Mentawians started to be criminalized by the Dutch because they are always hostile to outside traders from Padang and basically from the mainland. And they will say yes, lure, and then they kill the traders. And so it's a puzzle for me. Is this enmity towards the outsiders? From reading very carefully accounts on when things like this happen, when they try to trade highly valued timber, for example, with something that they're supposed to need from outsides. There's a conflict between the terms of trade, if I may, and this is so trade is actually another ground to say no. And when the European came not only with trade, but also with many different stuff, then it's giving them more reasons to continue the fighting. The other things that very interesting, it relates actually to Ben Anderson's writings on census. The Dutch also wanted to have a census for the islanders, but they couldn't go in to the islands. Very difficult terrains and swamps, and the beaches, it's hardly there. And then so you have to stay probably 2 or 3 miles from the shore, all these things. So the idea is actually for the Mentawians to stand in a row on the shorelines, and then somebody from the boat with a scope then say, okay, 22, 23, 24, and so, okay, this is from this village, and then somebody said, okay, the next village, and then they will count one by one. And when somebody didn't show up, then they know because the station's intelligence officers. Okay, so 3 persons failed to came up, and then they will chase these people, and then penalized. Census actually is a nightmare. It's not just a political idea related to the way colonialism works, but actually a real thing, and it's a nightmare for the Mentawians. Another things I found very compelling reasons for the Mentawian to continue this 100 years of insurgency is road constructions. So the idea is to have a spatial framework for extractions. The Mentawai Islands is stretched north-south, more or less, along the shore of Western Sumatra. Then the idea is really to have a longitudinal road across the islands, and then this becoming a hub for flows or timbers, whatever, to Padang. So road construction is a big thing, and probably more than half of the fighting actually relates to resistance against forced work for road constructions. Interestingly, today there's a Trans-Mentawai highway under constructions. The road are qualified as national type of roads, which you can imagine. And this is small islands. The Dutch realize we cannot do indirect rule. So the Dutch colonialism is characterized by the so-called indirect rules, where they will control the regions through the dynastic regimes, the natives, kings and all that. Of course, it didn't work with the Mentawians because it's completely different idea of power. And so it made a lot of sense, I think, for the strategists and the administrators to start thinking about work of civilizations, both through the helps of the Zending movements in the Netherlands. So very militant priests, but also teachers and anthropologists and all that, and try to understand how to win, the confidence of the Mentawians. It took 80 to 90 years for this agenda to finally accomplished or next to accomplished for the Dutch because of this resistance that is unpredicted by the Dutch. The military operations in response to this insurgency it's amazing. Of course, it's incomparable if you think about Aceh. You can imagine guerrilla warfare, but then handled with the coming of navy ships, brigades, always in big crowds of military officers. And they couldn't do much actually, because basically the whole waterscape, the arena for this insurgency, it's extremely difficult for the Dutch actually to control. The typical actions, burn the village. The whole village is burned. So they have to build everything from scratch again. The last thing, really, harassment of women. It's replete with stories like this. Of course, not all of them fit to print. Only after very careful readings of readers' letters, and then comments from the Liberal Party members in the Netherlands, so that you can see the whole pictures. During these long decades, the genuine Mentawian life space is a cascading idea about home. The umbrella called Ummah, which is also resembling the word rumah in Malay or in Indonesian, which means home or house. But Ummah is also a social ecological entity in itself. So it's not just the buildings, but also the whole landscape and the waterscapes. Everything serious is discussed there in Ummah. Rituals, healing rituals, and that's always in Ummah. Below Ummah, there's this laleb. This is like individual house for extended family. And there is something called russo. It's always in the wilderness near the forest. It's a shelter, basically, when you cut sagu, planting yams and all that. And russo is actually where the tabu absence. So when a young man got a crush on somebody, then through coded communications, then the girl will enter the rusuk first, and then the boy will join. And then when the boy didn't get kicked out, everybody knows that, oh, so there you are. So they becoming a couple. And then they will have children in the rusuks. And when the baby was born, then the grandma will grab the baby. So there's nothing wrong with it. The marriage is not coming yet. Only when the kids grew up, the couple starting having discussion. Are we going to marry? So this is actually puzzling for the World Psychiatry Associations. So in 1968, they published a very interesting report. It's called Normal Adolescence. So this is from the Western point of view, uh, what adolescence means. It doesn't fit the society and all that. It's like this. But throughout the world, there's one peculiar exceptions, and this is the Mentawaians. Only in Mentawai, adolescents can have much longer life, actually can be delayed for 20 years. And this is because of the practice. So this is the kind of gaze that the outsiders or the Sasareu look at the Mentawaians. We must deal with double agenda, how to resist the continuations of colonialisms and constructions of collective trauma.
Well, thank you so much, Yoyok. There's so much material there. I'm going to open it now to question and discussion. Who wants to ask the questions? I'm going to give the floor to our students so you can ask a lot of questions. Emily, So, Joseph, Isa.
Yeah, I had a question. Hello, hi, my name is Sake, and I was curious, like, while you have been researching the history, your history, I'm just curious, like, um, what have were there any issues that you ran into, like looking at your history, or like, looking at like, or any questioning or puzzling things, and also like what's helped you or motivate you to even continue this long-term effort of research?
Okay, thank you, Saki. In May 2022, I was invited for learning expeditions together with around 2 dozens of Mentawaians and progressive lawyers and activists from Sumatra to the biggest island, Siberut. I can see directly that something very wrong is happening on a daily basis. And, the economy is dominated by outsiders, and old women, work so hard, and, all these things, you are exposed overwhelmingly by everyday life of the Mentawaians. Of course, I learned before about the Mentawaians, then I start asking questions. What about this? What about this? So you are sort of deprived of the historical accounts on what happened to the Mentawaians. But the most deprived is actually the Mentawaian themselves. My months of digging into these newspaper clippings, colonial verslags and all that, I will share it with the Mentawaian people so they know and they can relate. So now I know why I cry, for example, and why my grandmother is telling me this, with tears, and because apparently there's this, and it's very difficult if you don't have these informations. One of my boatmen, it's he, of course, his name is Tomong, which means cannon. And I told him, do you know that your name is actually means cannon? And in the Dutch, and then through twist, and then it becoming Indonesian words. I know because my father actually told me this, and so very interested. And then so your father knows a bit about the colonial period. Well, yes, and then he shared a story about Kettinggangers. Kettinggangers is chain goers. This is the inmates that get shackles with shackles. It's just like African slaves, basically. So they lured into making crime. With the attraction is actually you will go to the prisons only for 2 weeks, and you will be fed very good, very delicious foods and that. But afterwards, you will be shackled, and then you will go en masse for projects, coal mining in Kalimantan and all this. And whenever they, Sawah Lunto is one of the oldest coal mines in West Sumatra. And whenever want to desert the mining, want to escape the minings, these slaves, the idea of running is actually to sail to the Mentawai Islands, particularly to Siberut, with the idea that the Dutch cannot catch because they sort of deprived of all informations. But of course, there's this intelligence officers everywhere on the Mentawai Islands. So the story of escaping Kettinggangers or chain goers to the Mentawaians actually also spread, of course, unequally among older populations. This is just an example how important actually to share the stories. I hope I answer a bit your
Yeah,
question.
thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Yoyok. We have room for more questions. Faiza, Ashima, Joseph.
Hi, I had a question. Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. I was curious what the perspective of the Taiwans themselves is in terms of like their resources, because obviously extraction by outside groups and outside people is not good. It is colonialist. But like, do they want to take advantage of the resources that they have in terms of relating with outside people? Do they want to take advantage of tourism, or is that more something that's being forced on them, and they would rather connect with their more, I don't know, the way that they had been living and those sorts of relationships? What's that like?
Thank you, Joseph. It's important questions. As you can imagine, actually, Mentawai is actually a paradise for surfers. Yeah, it's one of the best in the world, particularly in the south and the western part of the island complex. But that's actually something like an enclave economy. It's completely separate from the daily life of the Mentawaians, and it's controlled by outsiders. To be frank, all these fancy tourist resorts, and that's the first things. But the much more difficult things actually it's relating to educations and the imaginations of becoming modern. So modernity is actually it's extremely difficult word now for everybody in Mentawai. Because I, for example, always come with these lawyers who try to help them in the court and all that. I always, you know, listen to parents that got confused because their kids already in the college, having in a dormitory or renting a house with 4 or 5 other Mentawaians and all that. and they have no money. And the Matawian doesn't need money actually. Actually, a very fancy way of cutting sagu and processing sagu. It's completely different from the Papuans and the Malucans because they have water everywhere. So they can cut the sagu and then put it into a raft and then stay in the river, the raft, for 1 year, and it's still good. So whenever the sagu is gone in the house, then you just get one block like this, and then you all these things. You don't need money. But suddenly now, money is big thing. Everybody must have money to send their kids to school and to college. Extremely difficult situations. And the land grabbers, knowing this new appetite among the younger Mentawians, then they also lure the parents, say, don't worry, give us your lands, say 100 hectares and all that. We will send your kids to college in, provincial capital, Surabaya, and Jakarta, and all this. And of course, corporations and capital, of course, a big problem. But even bigger problem is the government. So the state managers actually is really sort of complicit. Mostly now privatized legislation process throughout Indonesia. So with this ultra neoliberal situations, then the Mentawian is lured to think and behave like the outsiders. Between the downfall of Suharto in 1998 and 2004, they accomplished the first step in their fight to become, autonomous Mentawians. But after 2004, things got worse in terms of this, neoliberal turns that even worse than the Suharto years, actually. And so new oligarchy, sprouts and all that. And this is the new autonomy enjoyed by the Mentawians becoming limbo. And actually under that situations, extractions and land grabs, became much faster and much more brutal.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead. One more question, Ashima. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, what kind of protest movement or resistance movement do you find effective?
Well, there's no, you cannot go by the book in Indonesia for sure. And there's no singular mode of resistance. But if you ask me as, if I put myself as a Mentawian, the only hopeful way of resisting is actually to put very tall fence to say no against outsiders, incursions, projects, and things. Don't let them entering your homeland and starting to deal and negotiate with the elders and all this. And this is actually happening across Indonesia, and we start to think now, for example, these energy transition projects now sort of, creating lots and lots of problems for indigenous peoples and communities in general. Some still go to Jakarta, to the ministry, protesting, bringing posters, but I would say this is very ineffective.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Oyok. That's brilliant and very thoughtful. Are you willing to take another last questions before we conclude, or one last question, perhaps? I know it's like past 1 a.m. Is there another question? Yes.
I'm nocturnal.
Oh, you're nocturnal. Anyone else Faiza, you've been very silent.
Oh,
Janice, go ahead.
hello. Yeah, hello. I'm trying to decide because I have two questions and I'm like, oh, which one should I ask in the time that we have? Okay, the one I'm actually going to ask is I've been thinking a lot about for this class, we have a group presentation that we're going to be working on in my group. Right now, it seems that we're framing around a theory called community cultural wealth, which is the idea that minority communities, rather than being based around like capitalistic values of culture, being like, oh, I own this, therefore I'm culturally rich. It's about how sharing ideas leads to building up that strength and knowledge. I'm gonna put the PDF in the chat. You don't need to take a look at it. I'm gonna just explain it out loud right now. So the theory has like 6 types of community cultural wealth, and let me get them out very quickly. And they are aspirational capital, which is the idea that being able to dream and imagine a better future is strength. And there's familial capital, which is the strength of family, social capital within your community, navigational capital of being able to navigate different systems, like let's say the education system or financial systems, linguistic capital, which is the strength of having a language that ties you together, and resistant capital of being able to resist opposition and stay strong and resilient. I wanted to ask what your thoughts were on this, on this model and how that might connect to the Mentawai and stuff.
Okay, thank you, Janice, for the sharing about the model. Uh, uh, don't be offended. I think the most interesting features of your model is actually the word capital, actually, with so many adjectives. And this is not unlike, for example, it's so hard to talk about justice these days. So you must have environmental justice, this justice, economic justice. I want to get screwed also. Please come, investment, then investment justice. You have to find the right adjectives actually to talk about justice. But if your focus, the core concepts in the model is capital, then it's failure foretold, I think. Maybe I go too far, but it's failure foretold. This is actually, it's kind of derivatives of the so-called social capital, you know, with the theory on social capital. That's see things, you know, and basically it's a discursive system and practices dominated by the economic nexus still. So while you don't talk about taking advantage of the richness of your culture, then you actually entrap yourself within this kind of narratives. I think the alternative is actually to get away from that all and try to find the idiom of how you will sustain and protect, you know, life and your life space. Yeah, and this is all endangered. This is actually your questions relates to why in 2007 we fight so hard, and I've got, you know, sneered at when I say I'd like to develop this bridging construct called historical social ecological entity. That's now it turns into, for example, a conquest and exploitative space-time zones. So this is actually a rapidly evolving idea about life and the enclosures. And for minority, this is even more ridiculous and more difficult to deal with. Yeah, and you cannot separate, for example, particularly for the minority, the body and the territory notions. And so you have to deal with all that first. And genuinely asking the owners of the experience, the traumatized subjects actually, and let them narrate what we need. Don't come with any model at all. This is already intellectual imperialisms that you show tonight. I mean, we thought you, of course, you know, bad intentions, but if you you share your model with me, and I'm a woman, say 40 years old, and I'm a Montavian, I will be offended with your model, definitely. That's my answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. So,
Thank you so much, Yoyo. I think we've come to the end of our formal session. So I just want to thank you so much again for joining us. And
Thank you so much for inviting. I really enjoyed.
yeah, I really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for participating. And it means a lot to me. And I'm going to share the recording